With climate change a continuing concern, the shift to a low-carbon economy is a priority for many, but it will be expensive. A report from the International Energy Agency says the transition could cost $10.5 trillion over the next 20 years. That money could come from financial markets with the sale of climate bonds. Just have to get the investors interested. Sean Kidney is the chair and co-founder of the Climate Bonds Initiative. Great to have you here.
Thanks for inviting me.
How do they work? What is a climate bond?
Well, a climate bond is just simply a means of financing a climate change solution. Might be an asset-backed, it might be a sovereign, there's all sorts of different sorts of bonds. Look, at the end of the day, the key point is finance going towards solutions to climate change. And they're profitable.
The problem with this assumption is that you have to float a bond like that. I'm a huge bond buyer. It's what I do for a living. I wouldn't touch a bond that is based on a market that governments dictate, because you don't have unanimity in this issue. You don't have every country agreeing that this is the solution. And troublesome now, worse than anything, is you don't have data to support this. So this is a big problem for me as an investor.
Whoa, hang on. There's two things you're saying there. One is, would you touch a bond issued by a government like a rail bond? You do it here. But the other thing you're saying is madness. Every single major national science academy in the world, the International Energy Agency, the US government, even the Canadian government. So we could have a climate change debate, well, but it kind of doesn't matter.
Because I think it does. I think it does.
No, it doesn't. Because a climate bond, all it is at the end of the day, is a productive investment. It's an investment-grade bond. You can choose to buy it on credit rating. You can ignore the climate aspect. I don't mind. Or you can choose to buy it because it's climate and has got an investment-grade rating. That's the point of the bond, which is so you can have it both ways. It's no big problem.
What kind of yield are we getting on a climate bond?
Well, climate bonds that are out at the moment are AAA, AA, and the yield depends on the currency, of course.
Yes. Okay.
So the ones we're looking at are all investment grade.
Yeah.
And what assets would they be secured by?
Some of them are sovereign bonds. Some of them are World Bank corporate-style bonds. Some are bank bonds. One that's coming out next week is a $500 million AA2 rated, which is just a straightforward corporate bond linked to a wind energy loan portfolio for credit purposes. It's a straightforward, bog-standard bank bond. But if you are concerned about the climate bond, you can buy this as a particular kind of bank bond. Others are secured against wind farms and so on. They get standard, Standard & Poor's ratings. There's a Breeze bond in Europe, which has been downgraded to junk bond. It's not very good. On the other hand, there's a Topaz bond that came out just last month.
For a wind farm, because you're going off the futures of selling electrical issuance. Right. That has nothing to do with climate change.
You know, if you don't want it to do with climate change, that's fine. It's your choice. But we live in a world where a fair number of players, including institutional investors, are concerned about climate change. And they're looking for a way to have an exposure where they get a good yield plus address what they consider to be the macro risks of climate change. That's the point.
How speculative might some of the plays behind the bonds be? Because as Kevin notes, a wind farm is pretty straightforward kind of analysis.
Yeah, that's right.
Do these also finance new technologies or any kind of...
Bonds aren't great for financing high-risk stuff, as you know.
Yeah.
They're really ideal for refinancing or for mature technologies. So you may get some people doing stuff along those lines, and there's a niche business in doing that, which is high yield, high risk. But fundamentally, most of the bonds are going to be for a mature wind farm, a solar farm. They're going to be for rail, which is a big part of the climate change solutions. They might be for sustainable agriculture too.
Let's go back to the issue of climate change itself. Is it going to be difficult to get this done when many governments, I'll give you some examples, the Chinese government, for example, isn't on board to tax their economy at the same level some Western economies are willing to, or at least politically saying they're right to? Because there is a banner at the NASA headquarters right now that says, "In God we trust," and everybody else has to bring data. There's a lot of scientists that don't agree with this and don't think we should burden North American economies with such a huge cost.
Well, that's a choice, of course, North American economies can make. But I'd just go back and say, the IEA put out a report. The International Energy Agency is not a very radical body, I'm afraid. They do represent the world's oil interests. And they put out this report where Fatih Birol, who's the chief economist, is quoted in the paper today. I was reading it as I was coming up, saying that we're on track to a world of 6 or 7 degrees warming, which he calls catastrophic. Hey, who am I to know? I'd look at him. He's an expert.
We don't have a ton of time, 10 seconds, but how big is this market, the bond market?
174 billion at the moment. Pure play.
Yeah.
There's about another 200 billion, which is companies' 50% or more revenues. And we think it'll become very large, whatever people think about climate change. So it's an opportunity. We have a particular opportunity in this country. Pension funds are world leaders in infrastructure. They need to diversify into a growth sector.
Thanks for being here, Sean.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Sean Kidney, chair and co-founder of the Climate Bonds Initiative. Coming up after the break, a 15-year-old whiz kid may have found a way to save countless lives from cancer. It's faster, cheaper.